And Gabe, of course, I'm going to go to you first with this one, man. We have Juju Smith-Schuster. I believe he's a restricted free agent. They can franchise him, but everybody is saying they're going to let him walk. They have no cap space, no nothing. They're kind of maxed out there. So where do you see your man Juju Smith-Schuster going?
This Pittsburgh Steelers are literally in like the twilight of whatever they're trying to do. Their defense is magnificent. Ben Roethlisberger is so, but if they're going to win with him, they need to do it absolutely right now. So I think ultimately they're going to try to surround him with as many weapons as possible like they did last year. That means franchising Juju Smith-Schuster. From an envious standpoint, he's got to go to Las Vegas, baby. Like, that is the spot. Is it fantasy appetizing? No, Joe and I were talking about this earlier. It's not really fantasy appetizing because you have a person in Derek Carr who doesn't really throw a lot to the wide receiver. He throws to Darren Waller. Now, sure, Nelson Aguilar last year, people are saying that because he's out the door in Las Vegas, Juju Smith-Schuster can come in and eat those targets. They weren't necessarily the greatest targets. I will say this. There were people out there starting Aguilar in their fantasy lineups, in the fantasy playoffs and towards the end of the fantasy playoffs or fantasy regular season. I just don't think the volume's always going to be there to keep him relevant as a fantasy wide receiver. Nelson Aguilar finished as the wide receiver 36 on the year. So pure fanboy, Oakland Raiders. Logistically speaking, I think he stays in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I mean, I guess that makes sense if they want to win now. But dude, when they franchise tag these guys, like I don't know what the exact numbers are for some of these high-end receivers, but like
expensive.
If they franchise tag Dak Prescott, the Cowboys, right? It's like $35 million or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's like money out of the owner's pocket. So it's not as easy as we think franchise tagging, So it's like those guys you have to do. And maybe they see Juju as that guy. He's so young. He's like, what? His birthday.
Only 24.
When was he born?
Yeah.
24. I knew he was young, though. He's 23, young. 24. Yeah. So, I mean,
his market value, according to Scott Thompson, too, is right up there. It's like 16, 17 million. So, same type of money as Kenny Galladay.
We all fantasized about Juju being the next superstar after Antonio Brown left, but it never happened. And I think he's realized
got time, baby.
This past year that he's a great number 2 option on a team. And for me, and maybe even a number 1, I think if he leaves Pittsburgh, I mean, this would be kind of sucky because they're in the same division, but he could go to the Baltimore Ravens. Look, Lamar Jackson needs people to throw to. Look, it's not just that he's not the best thrower. It's that, look, Marquise Brown is inconsistent. And I think if you need to give this man somebody else to throw to, somebody he can throw to in the middle, and I think Juju going there, that would be a kind of FU to the Steelers in a way. But look, I don't know how expensive he's going to be. They do have
16, 17 million.
They do have some cap space. So, and I think fantasy wise, he would flourish there. So I would go with the Baltimore Ravens. Got any differing thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, I just first off, I hate the Ravens for him. I think Lamar Jackson sucks at throwing the ball. I think that kills his value. And listen, the problem with Lamar Jackson is similar to the problem as Derek Carr. And like Gabe said, we talked about this. They don't look at the wide receiver. So it doesn't matter who you get them there. They're going to focus on their running backs, their tight ends. That's their main focus. So it's unfortunate, but I actually have a spot that I think Juju's going to end up, and I think that's with Robert Saleh, Deshaun Watson, and the New York Football Jets.
Snap.
And I think that this is their target more than Kenny Galladay because I think Juju is a lot more gettable. I think he matches that age range very good. Deshaun Watson needs himself a number 1 guy.
They're like the same age, right?
Yeah, and Juju is fast.
Juju would light it up if that happened.
Yeah, and he's fast like Fuller. We've seen Fuller have a ton of success with Deshaun Watson. I think that Juju's going to slot in there. They already have some other young guys that they brought in at wide receiver, but there's really nobody to compete with for that number 1 spot. And I think Juju, if we've learned anything about this guy over the last year with his TikTok dances, and he's very egotistical. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying he's full of himself, right? And the guy knows and thinks that he can be a number 1. And I talked to Gabe about this back in week 2. I said, he might get traded to the Raiders. But now that I'm looking at the Raiders, I just don't think that they're going to – I don't know. I think you have bigger issues than a wide receiver. So I think if the Raiders go out and try to get Juju, it's a mistake. It's asset management mistake because you need defense. Your wide receivers are kind of up-and-coming young guys. You have Ruggs, you have Renfro, you have Edwards, you have Waller, you have Jacobs, you have pieces on the offense. So either you believe in Carr or you don't, because if it's getting Carr another wide receiver, the problem is Carr. So either you get rid of Carr or you go and fill out the defense because their defense sucks. They gave up leads to Miami, leads to the Chargers. These weren't the best teams.
Lost to the Jets.
They were right there with a chance to go to the playoffs. We all thought they were going to go to the playoffs while they're beating up the Kansas City Chiefs, the only team that could consistently compete with them. So I don't know. I don't see the Raiders as much as it's kind of Juju in the black and silver. It makes
Las Vegas.
Yeah, it sounds right, but I see him in New York. He's a big ego. It makes a lot of sense for him to end up in New York, where he's featured with Saleh, with Watson, and with a good offense. That's not a bad offense by any means with those two.
I'll piggyback off of what Joe said really quick. I get it. We're all speculating that if Deshaun Watson goes to New York, of course, any one of these guys is a good fit there, right?
Yeah.
And Juju's a perfect fit. Looking at the Raiders, though, I mean, you said everything right. The only thing that I could kind of consider it is if we're not looking at it from a fantasy perspective, sure, Juju is super egotistical. He's also a really good football player, except at being a number one wide receiver. Mm-hmm. He's been a good number two wide receiver. He plays hard. He does the heavy blocking. He does the heavy lifting on runs and schemes and things of that nature. So I think if you line him up alongside someone like Ruggs, like up-and-comer like Renfro in the slot, and another up-and-comer like Bryan Edwards, I mean, yeah, they could do a lot more work on defense, but I don't think it's entirely out of the realm of possibility.
Listen, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility either, because I think that Gruden is just give me more fucking offensive pieces and I'm going to make it happen. You might score 30, but I'm going to score 40. That's kind of the mentality, but I don't think it's a smart mentality. I think remind me, who's your guys' GM, Mayock? I think he needs to talk him out of it and say, dude, we need defenders. Our defense is, we got, the Niners were missing Bosa. I was talking to my buddy, he's a Raiders fan. Niners were missing Bosa. We lost Buckner. We didn't have D Ford all season. We didn't have a defensive line. And we still had 10 more sacks than the Raiders. And the Raiders are a team that just went out and drafted 2 defensive guys in the top 10 the last 2 years in a row. And they're not getting sacks. So you need to fill out that defense.
Most definitely. They usually do their work in the draft, but it's proven to not be too satisfactory. So, yeah, they can probably spend some money in the free agency.
Yeah. That is a fair point. I'm not choosing the Raiders for any of these other wide receivers the rest of the show. But, Justin, do you see a different fate for Juju Smith-Schuster?
I sure do.
This is the final one, Gabe. This is where he's going.
I think he wants to stay in Pittsburgh, but the money doesn't work for him. And you talked about a team that needs playmaking and the ego works, and that's the Patriots. If they're going to make a splash, they can – This is like a money tier up of Corey Davis. I'm not saying he's better or worse. I'm saying the name alone brings that. So you look at their wide receiver core last year, and it had some nice flashes, but they don't have anybody that's our one going forward, no doubt about it. And why not put him over there? You pair him with a new quarterback, hopefully, and maybe Belichick can have a good luck with another Steeler wide receiver, and it could be a good match. But he's going to try to get paid. I don't think the market's going to pay him. And then that's the Patriots market right there, where they get that guy who thinks he's valued a little bit more and gives them just a little bit less.
Yeah, I think with Juju, like we talked about the motivation for these guys, maybe Juju's motivation is I want to be the number one wherever I go. And that could be the Jets. That could be the Patriots. To
be fair, he hasn't had the chance to prove that he can or cannot to a full extent.
Yeah.
Because we lost Roethlisberger, and then this year they had Chase Claypool. They had too many options. It's not necessarily a flack on him. I mean, go look at his numbers.
Not at all. And for a while, they were all three performing. a game stretch. Yeah,
I used him in the fantasy playoffs and leading up to the fantasy playoffs, and he was killing it. He was a 20-point guy every week. It wasn't that he had a 4-week stretch where he just wasn't that great. But aside from that, he was really solid, and he was getting 13, 12 catches some games. So,
but that was also under a 50, 55 attempt Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
So it's a little inflated. But no, I think that's the Patriots. He can be the number one. He can highlight himself and get paid. And they need to get some offensive weapons because they're just lackluster over there. So why not Juju?
I could definitely see that. I could see it.
It seems like we all agree that the Patriots are going to make some sort of splash.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's just about how much they're willing to spend. As Gabe mentions, they haven't historically spent money to bring in those big name wide receivers unless they're doing it through trade and they're a short-term stop. Most of their wide receivers that have stayed long-term have been homegrown products. So we'll see.
What's the price point on Juju, Gabe? What's your boy say about Juju?
He's with he's the same as Kenny Golladay, right around 16 million. And that's like that he's factoring in a 5-year max contract, which a lot of these players are trying to get 4 or 5 years, $60 to $80 million.
I think that's a bit high, but we'll see.